Happy Sunday, happy Sunday. This is going to be short and to the point. We are going to talk about Austin Metcalf and Karmelo Anthony. We're going to get into the details of the incident. So for those of you who don't know, I'll give you a high-level overview, but then I'm going to start off with just the facts. We're going to talk straight facts, right? Like, we're going to start off objectively with the reports, the police reports, all the things that were being made. But the high-level overview is that in April of this year, there was a track meet. Two kids were at the track meet from different schools. Those two kids got into some sort of argument or disagreement. Things then escalated. One of the kids is going to, we'll talk about in a second, stabbed another child in an act that he said is self-defense. The police apprehended him. There's been an ongoing conversation about whether or not Karmelo Anthony, who is the one that stabbed the other child, Austin Metcalf, is right or wrong. But before we get into this, I want to keep it objective. I want to give us the details. I collected the police report and all of the updated information just so that there's no confusion. So this happened on April 2nd of 2025 at approximately 10:01 a.m. The Frisco Police Department responded to a stabbing incident at a stadium. The suspect, Karmelo Anthony, was apprehended after being identified as a black male wearing a gray hoodie and blue sweatpants. Right? So what we know from that day is that Officer E. Cortez is the one that initially apprehended Karmelo Anthony after the incident. He reported that Karmelo Anthony's first statements were, "I was protecting myself, he put his hands on me, and I'm not alleged, I did it." And he also asked if what happened could be considered self-defense. So this is what Karmelo Anthony asked the initial arresting officer. The evidence and transport. So the officer noticed blood on Karmelo Anthony's finger, which is a part of the evidence. Karmelo was transported to Frisco PD jail, and his clothes were placed in Frisco PD evidence bag and secured. Cool. All right. So then another officer said that he came and saw Karmelo Anthony in handcuffs and heard Karmelo Anthony asking if this was self-defense, and Karmelo Anthony said he did it. So then there was a bunch of photos, and there was a knife with a trap to be preserved as evidence, right? Okay, so there's a knife that was preserved as evidence. Austin Metcalf, the victim, the athletic trainers and medics provided the victim, who was initially unconscious and not breathing, with medical support. The victim was transported to Texas Health Plano, and the victim was later pronounced deceased at 10:53 a.m. Okay? Evidence heading to the hospital, they took the victim's clothing, photos of the body. Family members were allowed to see the body, and the body was transported to the medical examiner. And then there were witnesses who shared what they witnessed, what the interaction was, which I'm going to read what the witnesses said, or give you a high-level overview of what the witnesses said, right? So what we know, someone got stabbed. The police were called. Karmelo Anthony was apprehended. He did not resist arrest. He was handcuffed. He asked a bunch of questions, let them know that he said that Austin Metcalf put his hands on him first, and that he was defending himself, and he asked the officers if it was an act of self-defense. Those are the facts. That is a matter of fact. There's no opinion based in that, no nothing, right? So then we also know that there were two witnesses. But the witnesses, so one witness, they go unnamed. So one witness was from Memorial High School. A member of Memorial High School track team stated that Metcalf told Anthony to leave their tent. Anthony allegedly responded by saying, "Touch me and see what happens." While reaching into his bag, when Metcalf touched Anthony, Anthony allegedly said to punch him and see what happens. So this witness is saying that he came and told Carmelo Anthony to leave the tent. Carmelo Anthony essentially said no. Carmelo Anthony then said, touch me and see what happens. And then I guess Metcalf then decided to touch him. He then said, Carmelo Anthony, punch me and see what happens. And then the witness reports that Metcalf grabbed Anthony to move him and pulled Anthony out, and Anthony pulled out a black knife and stabbed Metcalf in the chest before running away, right? This is from witnesses and the police report. Remember that. This is not my opinion. This is not hearsay. Witness number 2. So they tried to interview Austin Metcalf's twin brother, but he was too emotional. And then another witness asked if he could speak with the officer. So because Austin Metcalf's twin brother was not able to speak because he was so distraught, which we understand, the other witness asked to speak. And this is what the other witness said. He said, I attempted to ask them both what had happened. I could not really get anything out of Hunter, but the second witness, this is what the police officer said, but the second witness stated that he wanted to speak. I asked him what happened, and he stated that they were sitting on the bleachers under a Memorial High School tent when another male who they did not know walked over and sat under the tent. The witness then said the victim, Austin Metcalf, told this male that since he did not go to Memorial High School, that he needed to leave the tent. The victim, Austin Metcalf, and the male went back and forth, and the victim stood up and pushed the male to get him out of the tent. Okay? So both witnesses, okay? And he said during this time of the arguing, the male reached into his bag, that he had. And at that time, he took out what looked like a knife and stabbed the victim and left the scene. Those are the 2 reports that are in the police report, right? They both allege that that Carmelo Anthony was in a tent that wasn't his school's tent, that for whatever reason, Austin Metcalf thought that he needed to be the one to tell Carmelo Anthony to leave. Carmelo Anthony said, I guess, no. Austin Metcalf then began what it seems like to posture himself in a certain way. Carmelo Anthony said, touch me and see what happens. He touched him, and then he decided to go forward. The thing that's conflicting about the 2 statements is that how many times he told him, because in one statement it says, touch me and see what happens, and then it says, punch me and see what happens after Austin Metcalf touched him. And then he pushed him, and then Carmelo Anthony stabbed him. The other statement basically says, he said, touch me and see what happens. Austin Metcalf grabbed him, and then Carmelo Anthony went in his bag, found what he had, and stabbed him. Right? So those are the facts of what happened. This is not my opinion. I know y'all are going to be upset because, whatever, but this is not my opinion. So after all of that, Carmelo Anthony, after he was arrested, was then released, was placed initially on $1 million bond. So initially, they had him on bond for $1 million and said that he could not be released unless he paid $1 million. Subsequently, the judge decided to reduce the bond because they thought it was too high. They reduced the bond to $250,000. The $250,000 was paid by his family. That's an important detail. His family paid the $250,000 for him to get out on bond. He was then put on house arrest with an ankle monitor, and he's not allowed to leave his home until the end. This is all over, or unless he gets permission from the judge, right? So some of the misinformation that was going around was that Carmelo Anthony's family took the money that they raised on GoFundMe, because I think they raised somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million. People were saying 2 things. One, that they used that to bond him out of jail. They did not. They did not touch the money. And the second thing that people were saying was that they were buying houses and cars and all that other stuff. That never happened. That did not happen. That is untrue. Now, they also, they did a press conference. So Austin Metcalf's father was interviewed by the news. He did his own thing where he explained, he said he doesn't hate Carmelo Anthony and that he's praying for him, but he wants justice for his son. And that's that. Now, the Karmelo Anthony's family was doing their news conference and their press conference, and Austin Metcalf's father, who said that he had forgiven Karmelo Anthony and wanted God to whatever, he showed up at the press conference and was asked to leave. Now, he said he was showing up because he just wanted to see what they were saying, but he was asked to be escorted out. And so that's what we know so far. So some of the things that are important to note so far is that Karmelo Anthony, Karmelo Anthony's legal team was going back and forth. So Karmelo Anthony is a 17-year-old with a 3.7 GPA, and he's a senior in high school, right? So he was set to graduate this year. He had no prior arrests, no criminal history, no background. The school was not sure if they were going to allow him to graduate, so his legal team requested that they came to an agreement with the school district that he'd be able to graduate, but he's not able to participate in the ceremony. Now, Austin Metcalf was 17 and he was a junior at a different school district. They did not go to the same school district. They didn't go to the same school. They went to two different high schools. One of them, Karmelo Anthony, went to Centennial, I think, high school. And then the other one went to Memorial High School, right? Austin Metcalf. So they went to two different high schools. So it was determined that Karmelo Anthony would be able, which to me, I feel like, and I'll get into that in a second about my thoughts as a school leader and what I know to be fact. He wasn't allowed to walk, but he was allowed to graduate because he met all the requirements for graduation. Austin Metcalf's father was upset about that, and thus he decided to go to the superintendent's office and request or demand to speak. The superintendent said, "I will not speak to you without a meeting set up." Austin Metcalf's father decided to put a meeting on the calendar. Let's hold that there. Now, what we need to know is that Karmelo Anthony has since been charged with first-degree murder and is being charged as an adult. Right now, there is no set date for Karmelo Anthony to appear in court again. However, it's going to sit in front of a grand jury, and they'll decide whether to indict Anthony on first-degree murder charges or lesser charge like manslaughter. If he is convicted, Anthony could face a mandatory life sentence but be eligible for parole after 40 years because of his age. Now, they're putting together a grand jury to decide whether or not he should be indicted on the first-degree murder charge or if there should be a lesser sentence like manslaughter, right? So that is what we know. They're expecting for everything to be wrapped up by the end of June with a decision on whether or not he's indicted on first degree murder. But as of right now, he's not indicted on anything. He is only charged. So let me speak to you now. I'm going to take off this hat and put on my school leader and district leader hat, right? I've been a school leader and a district leader, and I'm currently a coach, or I do leadership development for school leaders currently. You cannot, two things. One is that Austin Metcalf's father went to the superintendent to demand to speak to him about why Karmelo Anthony was allowed to graduate. The superintendent is going to take the meeting with Austin Metcalf's father, but he can't tell him anything. You're not allowed to share any information about a student with another parent. It doesn't matter if they go to the same school. It doesn't matter if your child was the victim. It does not matter. You cannot share any details about a student in disciplinary action at all with anyone. It is illegal. It goes against the law. It violates every Student Privacy Act. So what's going to happen is Austin Metcalf's father is going to go up there, complain. The superintendent can listen, but nothing can happen, and he's not going to be able to tell Austin Metcalf's father anything because he can't release any information legally. So that's one. Two is that, just so we're clear, Karmelo Anthony was not expelled from the school. He never got expelled. He met all the requirements for graduation. A school is legally required to provide a student with education as long as they are enrolled in the school, even if they're suspended, even if it's a long-term suspension. So one is that you have to have a hearing to expel somebody. So they have to collect evidence. They have to have a hearing. There has to be a person that is non-biased that will make the decision about whether or not they believe, based on evidence, that someone should be expelled. To get to a hearing, somebody has to make the recommendation for expulsion, and it has to be in alignment with the school's policy, right? Mind you, the two students did not go to school together. This is not two students who were classmates and went to school together. They went to two separate schools. So you can't technically expel him off the strength that you believe that he did something that he has not been found guilty of. He really wasn't even charged until recently. So there's no way for the school to have decided that they were not going to allow him to continue school. Even if your child gets a long-term suspension, the school is required to provide your child with education. They have to figure out how the kid gets education. They cannot just say that you sit at home long-term and whatever it is. You also just can't expel a kid. There's a whole process. So with that in mind, he's absolutely well within his right to graduate. And if his school district did not allow him to graduate, his parents would have came up on the greatest lawsuit ever. Okay? Technically, they could fight the fact that he should be allowed to participate in a graduation because there's no real disciplinary consequences that have been taking place to our knowledge from the school. So if he's not being disciplined from the school, you can't technically tell him he needs to sit out of a public graduation or something that he has earned and is supposed to have. Now, I'm sure his family agreed to this because they're not going to send him to the graduation. I personally wouldn't send my child to that graduation ceremony either because there will likely be people who are upset about what happened to Austin Metcalf, and they will likely either try to be violent towards Karmelo Anthony or make him feel uncomfortable. I would not put my child in a situation to participate in that either, so I'm sure that that's why they agreed to say he doesn't need to participate in the graduation ceremony, but the school probably couldn't really stop him from doing so. They couldn't even expel him, which is why he's graduating. So that's like a matter of fact. And whether or not Austin Metcalf's father is upset, and I understand people grieve because you lost your son, you don't get to demand that somebody doesn't get to graduate with an education that they acquired on their own. Like they acquired it. They met the qualifications. It is what it is. Y'all, whether or not you agree or disagree that it was self-defense doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, he met the requirements for graduation prior to and after all of this happened. So he's still eligible to get that diploma. Now, we'll have to see what a grand jury decides in the indictment. Now, moving away from the like logistical standpoints, and this is not in a court of law, this is Dwight telling you my perception of it. If somebody tells you not to touch them and you touch them, and from what it seems like you do it twice after they gave you 2 fair warnings, that's on you what comes next. You understand what I'm saying? You can't say that it's not self-defense. And I hear a lot of people saying, oh, that's not an equitable response. Like someone bullying you, that's not an equitable response for somebody to stab you. You don't get to determine how people respond when you bully and harass somebody. And this is what I'm saying. We keep having conversations about what happened after, but we're not talking about the accountability during. I get that you may feel like stabbing somebody was a bit harsh, but that doesn't really go that way. You understand what I'm saying? And the law does not say that because Texas is a stand your ground state. Stand your ground exists in Texas. So if he felt like he was in danger, and he did technically give 2 fair warnings. He said, touch me and see what happens. And then he said, punch me and see what happens. He said, see what happens. And you continue to do so. So he technically was in fear. And he's telling you that, don't put your hands on him. And the reality of it is that his mother, Austin Metcalf's mother, tried to paint a picture that Austin Metcalf was somebody who upheld the rules. So when she did her interview, she said, Austin Metcalf is a child who upholds the rules and he likes when people follow the rules. So that's probably why he told him to get out of the tent. That's not how that works, ma'am. It's also not following. You're also not the person who needs to tell somebody to get up out of a tent. If you feel like somebody is in the wrong place and it's bothering you this much and it's this much of an issue for you, you go and get an adult. He's not the police. You're not the police. You're not the judge and the jury. You don't get to decide where people are supposed to be and when they're supposed to be there. What your job was to sit in the space. Even if you said you're not supposed to be here and he didn't move, get up and tell somebody. But for you to continue to aggress, this young man and move towards him and grab him, and he's telling you that he doesn't want to engage, all for you to feel like he needed to get from under the tent while it was raining, you don't have the right to do that. And that's just the reality. That is just the reality. Now, the grand jury is obviously the group of people who get to decide whether or not they feel like any laws were violated and if he is guilty of the crime. But I honestly think, based on what we've already seen, which is the evidence that is laid out in front of us, it sounds to me like it was self-defense. The witnesses told us what happened. This all was started by Austin Metcalf. Karmelo Anthony didn't start with him. Karmelo Anthony didn't put his hands on him first. Karmelo Anthony didn't just pull out a knife and stab somebody. There was an entire, there were steps that came that led up to this. Is it sad that somebody lost their life? Absolutely. We don't want to see people losing their lives. I'm not encouraging anybody stabbing nobody, but what I'm also not encouraging is you not bullying people. I'm also encouraging people to think before they do things, because you don't know what somebody is capable of doing after they're bullied because of their trauma. You don't know. You don't have the context of the history of people. And so you, again, and this is what we need to teach our kids, instead of trying to take this moment to say that the response was too big and that people shouldn't be acting like stabbing a kid is normal, we shouldn't be acting like bullying a kid is normal either. As someone who's worked in schools for years, I want to make it clear, we shouldn't try to normalize bullying either. We're not having a conversation. This whole thing started with bullying. If we're having a conversation with our kids about keeping their hands to themselves and not trying to make other people feel uncomfortable, some kids are bullied to the extent where they take their own life or take someone else's life. We've seen it happen time and time again. That is documented history. So